Hola, somos Tania Moreno y Daniela Álvarez de TCU.
Y estás escuchando College Volleyball Weekly. ¡Go Frogs!
This is Tania Moreno and Daniela Álvarez from TCU.
And you're on College Beach Volleyball Weekly. ¡Go Frogs!
Hi everyone, I'm Charlie Ekstrom of Stanford Beach Volleyball, and you are listening to College Volleyball Weekly Beach Edition.
Hi, I'm Alana Rennie of Arizona Beach Volleyball.
And I'm Alex Parker of Arizona Beach Volleyball, and you're listening to College Beach Volleyball Weekly. Is that right?
No? All right. Hey, good day, everyone. I'm Rob Sparrow with the Viral Volley Podcast. We've got a special episode of College Volleyball Weekly Beach Edition Top 20. On screen, we have LSU head coach Russell Brock, and it's totally an honor always just to speak with him on the beach. Just a wonderful countenance and personality to see. But on top of that, incredible accomplishments at LSU since even coming on board in 2014, then taking the head helm is it 2017. So Russ, thanks for coming on.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. Always enjoy chatting.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to all the good stuff you got, especially since we are regular season's done. You guys are in a holding pattern until your conference tournament this weekend. But I wanted to find out more about your team because they've kind of come up really strong here in the tail end of this 2022 season. So let me ask you this: going into the 2022, you lost a few pieces due to graduation, like the history-making pair of Kristen Nuss and Taryn Cloth, and others like Tony Rodriguez, Jess Landsman, and Claire Coppola due to graduation or transfer. But what was your outlook as the head coach going into 2022?
Yeah, it was an interesting year because it's been, we've kind of been in a building process since the program started. We've kind of been adding players and adding experience. And this was the first year, really, even though we've lost players every year, where we lost a big chunk of our program. So, the perception, among the experts around the country is that we were going to be pretty far off, the standard that we had set. And, that was really motivational, for us as a team. We knew that we obviously lost hugely significant and impactful players on our program. And even outside the ones that you listed, we had players that, were contributors at practice that we knew brought a lot to the table. Even players like Kaylee York, who, wasn't one of those players, or Olivia Ordonez Powers, who, had been in the lineup for years and were significant pieces to our team. So for sure there was a little uncertainty, but we also knew, even though we had 13 going out, we had a good chunk, 12 or 13, who were still returners, and all of those returners had been playing against basically, in our opinion, the best team in the country for the last 2 years. So even though they hadn't really been in the lineup, the experience that they got playing against Claire and Kristen and Tony and Olivia and Kaylee and Jess, all of those, they've had to face them every single day. So it wasn't even like they played, 30 matches a year. They played, 100 matches a year against the best team in the country. So we knew that they had been training really hard. They were very capable players. They were highly recruited for our program. They just hadn't been in the lineup. So it was kind of fun, and it was really exciting because we had players who were hungry. They had been around a program. They thought they were going to get a chance the year before, but then we had a bunch of people return because of the COVID option. And so they were hungry, chomping at the bit, ready to get in the lineup and ready to prove that they were the good players that we all knew that they were. So it was kind of fun to see us kind of down the line a little bit, and to know that these players who were going to be in the lineup, they were finally going to get their shot, were capable, and that we were excited. We had the same expectations to compete locally, regionally, nationally, to be one of the best teams in the country.
Well, you definitely have a strong squad as we develop. We've seen the progression through the 2022 season, but coming into the season, I saw you at the UCLA Invitational, and we were chatting on the side, and I had to ask this particular question of you, but when the Sandy Tigers were in Manhattan Beach for that UCLA Invitational, I asked you about your team and the athletes having to deal with like a wow factor, because you see Olympians like Tina Gradina there, big names like Haley Harward, Julie Scholes, and then Lexi Denneberg, and your response was interesting. I'm like, I was so surprised that a lot of these girls weren't aware of who they were, but that also on top of that they weren't even true beach players. So I was hoping you can, maybe go to an expanded explanation as to what you shared with me on the beach that day.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's one of the beauties of having kind of those less experienced players is they know who the players on our team are, but they don't really know a whole lot about kind of the landscape of beach volleyball across the country, traditionally, historically. So, those players who were walking into those matches, they kind of knew who they were, but they hadn't had, 10 years of, following the sport and really understanding the major players or even the other programs. And sometimes that's a big blessing.
Yeah.
Even some of those indoor crossover players, like Holly, who ended up having to play against Tina, like she's played against the best indoor players in the world for the last 4 years. So, for her to face another player who's highly touted, really didn't give her much pause, and she was just going to go out and try and do the things that we trained. And I think that's right. The beauty of kind of where we were in that moment is that they didn't mind who was on the other side of the net. They were just going to play as hard as they could.
Yeah. Well, it just seems that, being having these crossover players who are obviously extremely talented, but the progression of adapting to the sand game has been really fast for your crew. What do you attribute that success to?
Well, a big piece of it is how hard they work. And we've had traditionally, our program has had indoor crossovers, for a long time. So it's something that we've kind of out like how to progress them as fast as possible and really to focus on the things that they can do well and try and put them in positions with partners that allow them to be comfortable doing what they're naturally capable of. And then the longer they're around, then obviously their game becomes more and more well-rounded. And I think that that's the case with particularly those two this year with Holly and Kylie is, they were able to, they had the ability, they just didn't have the experience. So to put them in positions with partners who could help them be successful. And then as they go through the season, they get more and more capable of playing our game and the things that make them great indoor, we find ways to incorporate them in the sand. And then the things that make them vulnerable, then obviously we just work every week that we come back from an event. It's funny, you have that conversation, like we'll be on at the airport coming home, and Kylie would say, hey, this week I really want to work on pulling. Like, okay, you're ready. Like, you need that. And the next week she'd be like, you know what? I really need to work on this aspect of my game, because you see where you're vulnerable. And then you have the opportunity to really get a motivated athlete who's capable and physical and athletic, and now understands really, because of a hands-on experience, what they need to work on. And you're able to really attack those vulnerabilities efficiently and during the course of the season.
Wow. Well, it's definitely some good stuff seeing where these athletes are going, because even being able to, it's a lot different watching a stream from your site versus seeing them play in person. But the things they're doing, mechanics and strategy wise, and seeing their skill sets, I mean, they're developing really fast and they're really good. So great competitors on the court.
Absolutely.
I want to jump beginning of the season here. You started 2022 with a 15-0 record. And you had to be pretty optimistic with a team that knocked off 2 top 7 teams in LMU, Grand Canyon in that stretch. But what were your thoughts on the Sandy Tigers' start to the season?
Yeah, super excited. I mean, when we headed into the season, we were realistic. We knew we didn't have the experience. We knew we had great players, but there was going to be a learning curve. So to come out like that, honestly, was a little surprising, just to be that far ahead of the curve, because it wasn't like, we scheduled a bunch of, patsies so we could just come out and get a bunch of wins. Like, we had some really tough competition. And every time we stepped up, even the opening weekend, playing Tulane at their place, playing Georgia State, in one of our early matches. And we had, the 10 people in the lineup, maybe 3 of them had played, significant college beach volleyball before. So when you're playing against teams that are well trained and have veteran beach volleyball players, like that's just a recipe for disaster without the experience. So so starting out and you know, getting those 5 wins early, and then the next weekend going out and getting more wins, like it was almost confirmation that what we were doing and how we were doing it was really working and worthwhile, because even from the get-go, our focus wasn't on necessarily wins and losses. Our focus was, hey, let's play the right way. Let's play with intensity, with integrity, with a high execution. You know, let's love each other well. Let's care for each other. Let's set the standard for our success, something off of a scoreboard, because you only get so many opportunities to understand if you're winning using a scoreboard. But every single day, every single practice, every single moment, you can determine if you're a success, if you have a different standard. So we tried to set just a different standard for our team, knowing that, you know, wins and losses weren't going to be necessarily within our total control early in the season. We knew we'd get to where we needed to be as we came down the stretch, as we gained experience, but that wasn't our vision. That wasn't our goal, to try and be undefeated, you know, 4 weekends into the season. We just wanted to be executing and playing and treating each other and enjoying our process as much as we possibly could. And then we'd see where we were when the dust settled as we got towards the home stretch.
Yeah. Well, you know, from perusing your stats and watching your team play, looks like you have a pretty versatile squad with pieces that you successfully move between the different flights. And I'm seeing, you know, one is a dogfight. You know, that's kind of like, okay, we just kind of got to go in and win if we can, but 2s, 3s, and 4s, you got a bunch of pieces you're moving, you know, from 4s to 2s, 2s to 3s, but gosh, they are all able to just play well with whomever they're partnered with, and they seem to be getting it done in that 2 through 4 slots. Can you explain what's made that shuffling so successful for you and your team?
Sure. Yeah, we, you know, knowing that we didn't have any established pairs, we had 0 pairs returning, like not even outside of the lineup. Everybody who was on the squad, you know, didn't have a partner who they had played with at all. So all through the fall, knowing that, we played a lot of different matchups. You know, we were really looking for some chemistry sparks and for some natural partnerships. And every weekend that we went in to play our fall competitions, we'd mix it up. We'd play everybody with everybody and just try and get some film on, you know, data, you know, stats and data and film to try and see, okay, who really works well together. So then when we headed into the season, we're like, all right, this is where we're going to start. And obviously it worked pretty well initially as we got into the season. But then when we got, you know, about halfway through and we had run a pretty consistent lineup, we knew we could beat a lot of people, but we also knew we hadn't beaten Florida State. We didn't beat UCLA. You know, we didn't beat any of the teams that were above us in the rankings. So heading into the second half of the season, we said, okay, let's mix it up. Let's put some different pairings out there, because we know we're going to play most of them again. And let's see if we can match up maybe a little bit better, or maybe find some additional chemistry, or just a few points here and there because they were close. And then we'll have the ability when we get to conference to either go back to where we were, or maybe do a different version of who we are. But there was always confidence and trust that, you know, wherever we ended up, we had the ability to compete with anybody we were across the net from. And that was, once again, that's a huge credit to our athletes, for one, being to buying into our system so they could kind of switch partners and still be able to play the same game, but two, to trust our coaching staff that we weren't demoting or promoting or dissatisfied. We were just using our depth as an opportunity to try and be a little bit better, which is all we need to be heading into the home stretch to maybe get over the hump against some of those teams that are ahead of us.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I recognize, like towards the tail end of the season here, is your strengths have been in your 3, 4s, and 5s. That's I'm going to drop some names here: Holly Carlton, Riley Allred, Grace Seitz, and Kelly Green Agnew, Ellie Schenk, and Sierra Caffo. After the UCLA Invitational, I was like, wow, your 3s, your 5s saw a lot of success. Did you expect that level from them going into the tail end here?
Yeah, we knew, just coming into the season without a lot of experience, we knew that our strength was in our depth. So it wouldn't matter, in our opinion, who was playing in those slots, that we basically, like, our fives can compete with our ones and twos. Our fours can compete with our ones and twos. Like, that's the strength. Our sixes that aren't in the lineup, like, they can routinely give our twos and threes like a battle. And that's not to say that we're not better or higher in the lineup. We're just, our depth is our strength. So inevitably, as you go play in rank order, like, the teams that are lower in the lineup from other schools are going to be, somewhat weaker than the teams at the top of their lineup. We feel like our strength is that our teams that are low in the lineup aren't that much weaker than the teams at the top of our lineup. So we knew coming in that we had to be really competitive at the bottom of the lineup, the middle to the bottom, because we felt like that was the strength of our program and the way that we were built. So, and thankfully that's played out, because if we couldn't be competitive at the middle to the bottom, then we were going to have a tough time with teams that, had more experience and that depth at the top.
Yeah. And speaking with the other teams during this season on the podcast, one of the patterns that we that our team saw on the podcast was 2s, 3s, and 4s were big, but I was like, wow, this is for Russell, his program's a 3s, 4s, and 5s. I wonder if that was intentional.
Right.
Well, looking here at the tail end now, they finished the season with a 4-0 weekend in the Battle of the Bayou. What are your thoughts on the way the Sandy Tigers finish the season?
Yeah, those last 4 matches at home weren't against some of the tougher competition we faced, but there are definitely teams that have been improving, and a lot of local teams, which we love. The more we can get Louisiana volleyball to continue to improve and put pairs out there and players out there that can compete on a national stage, the better it is for our little region, our little neck of the woods. So they were matches that we expected to win. So even going into it, the conversations weren't, hey, we need to come out 4-0. It's like, we need to come out satisfied with how we play these matches. And I think that the beauty of it was, I think one of our best matches that we played last year in 2021 was our senior night. It was the way that that our team played for each other, supported each other, cheered each other on, the last match of basically our regular season. And when we had as many seniors as possible we could get into the lineup, was honestly inspirational. I'd almost forgotten about it. But then this year, when we got to that last match, it was the same scenario. Like, when we put all those seniors into the lineup and we got to play for each other in that way, and really take the focus off of my pair or my ability, and say, I'm going to play for that senior who's next to me, or that senior who's on the court down the road, or I'm not in a lineup because a senior is, and I'm going to give everything I can to root them on and cheer for them. Like, when we kind of reach that space emotionally, our play rises to a whole new level. So it was a great reminder. And really what I brought out of that weekend was just really, as we kind of head into the home stretch with conference and nationals, like, that's got to be our mindset, not necessarily for our seniors, but for each other, that allows the best to come out of us when we selflessly attack this sport and selflessly interact with each other in a way that makes others more important than we are personally. And it brings us into a whole new level.
Hi everyone, this is Madison Fitzpatrick at Florida State, and you're listening or watching College Volleyball Weekly Beach Edition Top 20.
Hi, I'm Erica Brock from FAU. Hi, I'm Mackenzie Morris from FAU. And you're listening to College Volleyball Weekly Beach Edition.
So Russ, it just seems like if you don't have a mission statement, I feel like there's one that's pretty predominant with your team, but if there is or isn't, what would you say that is that would best describe your team and the culture that it operates in?
Yeah, I think every year we have, a little nuance, something a little bit different. We pick a word or a phrase, and this year that word is intentional. And that's, really about, it's referencing the fact that we want to be where our feet are. We really want to engage, not looking forward, not looking behind, but really just like, what are we doing right now? And loving each other well. And then that the spinoff of that particular word is that we want to We want to redefine success, which we've kind of talked about a little bit, not necessarily waiting, because ultimately at the end of the year, there's one team that wins their last match. And if that's what you're using to define your success, then there's one team that's successful. And we didn't want that to be us. We wanted to be able to be successful every day. And success to us can happen by walking into the facility, going out to practice, and looking forward to being around those people who care about you and love you well. Like, that's success. It doesn't have to wait until the last match or the last tournament. And then the other word we talked about, which kind of works into that, is reclaiming, or basically kind of reclaiming the word together. Like, we want to enjoy each other. We want to be able to look forward to being together, and whether it's a coach that walks into weights in the morning, or our athletic trainer that's gonna need you to show up somewhere, you're going to want to be around. And that whole together thing is important. And even kind of like we were talking about earlier, to see, like, when we're really doing what we need to do, the words that would come to mind would be love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and gentleness. All of those words that are fruit of a life that's being lived well. That should resonate with people when they watch it. It should look attractive. It should smell successful, not necessarily with an actual fragrance, but just by watching it. And I think that's, like I said, when we're doing life well together, then we're playing well together. And that's what's more important. That's the success that we're striving for this year.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I know I kind of jumped off of the normal question track, but I did have a follow-up to the original question. But, on your squad, is there anyone or a group of athletes or athlete that has impressed you in their growth and play this season?
Yeah, I think that, anytime you've got players who've never played the game before and they can play at a level, like when you see, the match that we played against USC, and Holly and Riley had to play ones just because we were in the flux of moving our lineup, and they had to play in that slot in that match because that's kind of where we were. And they played against Tina and Haley and, battled into a third. I mean, that's that kind of progress within the course of a year, to have people on one side of the net who had played in the Olympics and were one of the best defenders in the college beach volleyball game against two players that basically had just started playing and just battled them tooth and nail. I mean, that's incredible. And then for Kylie playing, basically twos, all year long, and literally had never stepped in the sand to play a volleyball match until the end of February. And then we've got people like, Parker Bracken, who's a freshman, who's now playing at the ones and is just holding her own, and is absolutely, she's not afraid of anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. She's going to go out there and battle you tooth and nail. So I think that, and you could really honestly go down the list, because in the grand scheme of things, for our players to be playing in these matches against these veteran players, and to not be affected, is pretty remarkable. And I'm so proud of them for that, because they just love the game and they love each other, and they're not afraid to go out there and battle against anybody. And so the growth that we've seen, and even I think it's almost like a maturing process, because they were babies, a lot of them were just babies in the game, and now they're they're still young, but they've matured in a way that allows them to compete at the highest level of the sport. And that's a lot of fun.
Right. Wow. That's pretty exciting. I did not realize that you had a freshman in your ones playing. Well, let's go now, as you are relaxing in this bye week, so to speak, but you're now preparing for what will most likely be a slugfest in the CCSA Beach Championships.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the Sandy Tigers are in a good place to make a strong run against these CCSA teams?
Yeah, I think that one thing that we've learned, and last year was a huge lesson for us. We had a great team, obviously, last year, and Florida State was kind of our nemesis during the season. We played them 4 or 5 times, maybe 6 times. I can't even remember. We played them a ton and we never beat them, and we didn't have a chance we were in every match, but we never beat them. But then when we got to nationals, we played them again and we knocked them out. And so I think that's that never to say I die attitude. The losses that we've had against the teams and how we've lost haven't discouraged anybody on our squad. Like, we know all it's shown us is that, hey, we are right there. Like, and even what we talked about today is how can you get, like, every single player needs to step up and talk about how can we get just 1% better? Like, what can you do to help our program be 1% better? Because that's about how far we are away from being able to get over the hump against not just one of them, but all of them. And granted, everybody's capable. I think if that's one thing that they've proven is they can beat us, they can all beat each other. And we have proven that we can compete, but we haven't been able to beat them. But that's never been something that we're afraid of that challenge. And I think that, the more we have those opportunities, the more we feel like, hey, we're gonna get through and break through that barrier and come out on top. So, we for sure will get opportunities at conference, and we expect to get opportunities at nationals to keep knocking on that door. And, we're not going to stop knocking.
Sounds good. Well, I mean, even further on, and I know we spoke a little bit about this because I just wanted clarity on who is going to be in Gulf Shores, because they're going to a 16-team format, and I haven't really seen a document out there, so I had to ask you before we went on. But assuming that LSU is going to be out there, you have been one of the most constant teams and consistent teams that have been in Gulf Shores playing for a national championship. How do you feel about your team's ability to compete again there and challenge the top teams across the nation?
Yeah, I think that we enjoy playing in Gulf Shores. We try and go there every fall. And then we usually schedule at least one event there during the spring as well, just because it's a fun place to be. Like, we enjoy going there. I think that we've traditionally played well there, and part of it's probably because when we do get to nationals, there's a lot of purple and gold that shows up to support us, and so there's a lot of great energy. And when we talk about building a roster, we talk about putting a lineup together, we want one that is built to compete well at Gulf Shores at the national tournament against the top teams in the country. And we feel like traditionally, historically, we've been able to do that, and we've had some great wins, we've had some close losses, but there hasn't been a time where we've been at Gulf Shores at the national championship tournament and not been able to compete at that level. So that's our expectation. We want to compete all year and have great seasons, but ultimately you're trying to get to the national championship tournament, and you're trying to put on a good show and put yourself in position to potentially win it all. And so that's, what we're expecting to do again this year.
Yep. Looking at your schedule and the results, I mean, the eight losses you have, they're all really tight decisions for the most part. But for those teams that you faced were in the top five, and there are 2 losses to TCU, 2 to Florida State, and 2 to UCLA. But again, tight matchups in those duels. That 1% could be a big deal come Gulf Shores. But it seems like the sense I'm getting is you feel like your team is in that place to be able to potentially pull that off.
For sure. And I think, obviously all those teams that you mentioned have to feel that way as well. They have to feel like they're in position, and they've earned the right to say, look, we think we can do this. And, but we feel like we're in that mix as well. They have been very close. The thing is that we've had some very close matchups, but they've all been losses. So, but once again, that's not something that is daunting. Like, we just know, hey, we got to be a little bit better. It's not out of reach. It's just, we've got to execute a little bit better. And on any particular day, we know we have the firepower and the ability, and we feel like we can game plan well enough to put ourselves in position to, if we execute, if we play in a way with the joy, with the peace, with the confidence that we know that we could beat anybody on any particular day.
Yeah. Well, final question for you. But if the season were to end today, how would you describe this team?
It's funny because that question has come up a couple times, and I even mentioned it to our team today when we were talking about kind of these next couple weeks that are all that's left. if we could finish it off, say we finish and win the national championship, to me, all that is a kind of a public statement about what behind the scenes privately we've known all along, all year, since before we even started playing. We've known that we're an incredible team with some passionate players that understand how to play the game, that are capable of being champions. And so for us, whether we do or don't end as that last team that's gonna kind of hold up the trophy and run into the water, we hope that that's us. But even if it's not, regardless of whether it is or it isn't, like, our success has been proven on a day in and day out basis on things that are, much different than just points on a scoreboard. So it would be a public acknowledgement, like everybody else would say, hey, look, they're winners, but we already know who we are. And that's the beauty of kind of playing in this way, is that there is zero doubt when the season ends, regardless of how it finishes, that I'm going to look back on this season with this group of girls and be so proud and so excited about just remembering the process that we've been on and kind of how we played this year.
Yeah. Well, Russell, appreciate you coming on, and I wish you the best at Gulf Shores. Well, actually, no, let me go CCSAs and then
That's right.
Gulf Shores.
Gotta go there first.
Yeah. I appreciate you taking the time this evening. I know that this is probably breather time, and it's kind of recollect your thoughts before the real competition begins this weekend. So I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's always fun to talk, and I love all the interviews you do. So it's fun to be on this side of it. So thank you very much.
I'll always take more LSU people, just so you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.